All right. What's good, y'all? How's everybody doing? Hope all is well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report for the week of the 17th November 2021. Y'all know what it is. Um, yeah. What's up, Mr. Donnie Mac? Yeah, he played an older video. I just watched that myself. And I don't like watching myself, but I was like, wait a minute, what is that? Uh, y'all check out Attorney Dennis Sperling. He just had me on from an older video we did. Shout out to Barry Little. Good to see you in here. Busy Mike, what's up? Trying to get it going. We are broadcasting today on innerlightradio.com as well as YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. So we are just trying to get it going in here. But anyway, welcome back to the Onyx Report, where we as Black male justice advocates use critical analysis to uplift boys, Black boys, and men. So that's what we're here to do. What's up, MLR? See you in there. I want to shout out my subscribers who have been incredibly supportive. And I want to thank you. Shout out, bartender. I appreciate that support. I want to thank my subscribers all together and listeners and viewers for getting us to 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. So shout out to y'all. Much appreciation. I'm digging it, man. I wasn't sure how or when this would happen. Shout out to MLR. I appreciate that generous support as usual. Hope you're well, brother. Mr. Blue Collar, good to see you. So I hope everybody's doing well. Let me go ahead and honor the subscribers for a quick second. So here we go. All right. So shout out to my supporters. I appreciate it a great deal. You have no idea how much. But if you haven't become a supporter, please make sure you consider doing so. You can, you should not only subscribe to the channel on YouTube, click the subscribe button, hit the bell, so you can be notified about anything we do here on the Onyx Report. But also go ahead and click the join button. And of course, there are different levels of membership you can engage in that come with various levels of perks. You can also go to Patreon, patreon.com/THJohnson, and become a monthly supporter of the Onyx Report or a supporter of the Institute for Black Male Studies. You can do both of those from Patreon. So shout out to those who are willing to do that, but check into that because we'd love to have you. So much appreciation for the support we're getting, and we're growing. So channel is pushing on, you know what I mean? In a beautiful way, slowly but surely. All right. So shout out to I'm Listening. Shout out to Christopher. What's going on? AB, what's the word? I see Brother Malika in here. It's always good to see you, man. So I hope all is well with y'all as we get this going. Let me see here. There we go. Get a few things off the table here. Feeling kind of a little low energy today, so I'm trying to get that going. And that happens sometimes even when I'm walking into the classroom, but usually the discussion kind of gives me some energy. So I'm hoping that happens here. What's up, brother? Show me. Welcome to the Onyx Brotherhood. Appreciate that. Welcome. Let's see here. There we go. All right. So y'all know what we do. We usually, and this is an organic process. I don't always do it. It just kind of depends on what comes across my desk. Brother Ian, what's happening? And that, this week, we're going to start off with our Sacred Black Masculine series. And this one is going to be a little different. This is not a contemporary one. This is actually one that you all might have known. I actually didn't know until the other day, but it'll just be a quick hit. It's not going to be an in-depth kind of thing, but it is a shout out to this gentleman here and his brother. Anybody know who this is? Just wondering. For those of you who are, able to see the screen, anybody familiar with who this is? See if anybody in the chat would be willing to drop a name. Actually quite familiar, and you know what to look for. There it is. So Mr. Peace God and Mr. Donnie Mac both identified one red fox on the left. And this is an image of Red as a very young boy. And he is sitting next to his actual brother, his older brother, Fred G. Sanford Jr. And apparently this is the namesake for his character on Sanford and Son. Now, I never actually knew that that character was based off of his brother, who apparently died 5 years before the show even appeared. So it seems like Red was saluting his brother in a particular way, almost kind of immortalizing him in a way by naming his one of his most popular characters after him. So I just wanted to kind of honor that for a moment, because when we do the Sacred Black Masculine series, I'm always trying to find examples where brothers are kind of doing some of the things I think need to happen more and need to be acknowledged publicly a little more often. And one of those things is Black men supporting each other, biological family or not, right? And him honoring his brother that way really just kind of hit me, in the chest. I said, damn, man, I've been watching that show my whole life. I didn't know. But at the end of the day, all I'm really saying is, in many ways, we all we got. And we got to be more supportive of each other, far more than what I tend to see, especially in social media. And I get it, right? Social media is an entertainment-based platform. YouTube itself, most particularly, is entertainment-based. So people are more drawn to drama than love. I get it. But nevertheless, the issues Black men face are not just up for entertainment. They are real. They are daily. They are entrenched in our lives in a wide variety of ways, and they are not limited to entertainment. So we have got to develop methods for supporting one another outside of just through the platforms that allow us to communicate our ideas by their policy, by their rule. We got to find ways to do that differently. One of those ways is my use of innerlightradio.com, right? Black-owned online radio station. It's a way of being able to communicate what I want to communicate without having to worry about which company doesn't like what I have to say. But beyond that, we also have to develop new aesthetics, new methods for doing so. And one of those methods can be a very old idea of honoring those that we value, right? Especially other Black men. So shout out to Red. Appreciate that example, sir. And shout out to your brother, who we all know because of your efforts, right? So that's my way of honoring him and his brother. And I guess it just, when you see an image like this, a picture of Red as a child, one I've never seen, but he ain't changed. He looked just like he looked when he was an old man. But the other thing is just, as my students like to say, this hits different, right? It hit different because, you end up developing a relationship through a medium and not even knowing it. So shout out to Red Fox. All right. So let me see here. All right. And we're going to move to special shout outs. This I'm not particularly thrilled about, but I thought it was due. I thought it was necessary, all considering. Some of you guys have seen this story. This is an image from Halle Berry's movie Monsters Ball that we all know. But it's an article you can find on Atlanta Black Star. It's entitled Halle Berry's Monsters Ball co-star, Karonji Calhoun Sr., dead at 30 from congestive heart failure. Former co-star's aid with funeral costs. So this was the young man that played her son in the film. And for those who are listening on Inner Light, this is an image I'm showing from the movie where Halle Berry playing his mother and he are sitting next to each other on the couch. The article I'm looking at did not have an up-to-date image of what he looks like, what he looked like before he passed. Nevertheless, if you remember the film, he was a fairly overweight young man. I assume he still was. I'm not really sure. but he played the son of Halle Berry and Sean Combs in the 2001 film. It says the death of the former child actor who garnered exceptional reviews in the Oscar award-winning movie was discovered through a GoFundMe page his mother, Teresa Bailey, created, seeking assistance as we prepare to give Gynarchy a sacred celebration of life. According to the note, the former actor died on Halloween. Right? Bailey told WWL TV that her son died as a result of congestive heart failure and lung problems. Unfortunately, we did not have any life insurance policy on him, as we never expected this tragedy to befall us before he transitioned. Now we ask for generosity in your donations as we prepare to give Gynarchy, and I may be mispronouncing his name, and if I am, I apologize. Prepare to give Gynarchy a sacred celebration of life. Thank you for your prayers, calls, texts, and selfless support. This one of the things that frustrates me about this, though, is how many people I've seen over the last year who basically had to depend on GoFundMe just to be buried. And that in and of itself is a problem that frustrates me. Of course, the lack of life insurance, can be devastating to a family. I can speak to that, how difficult it is, or I can speak to burying someone, a loved one, unexpectedly, and not having a lot of support to do that. That in and of itself can be a devastating situation, depending on what's going on with you. I'm, of course, also upset that this young man is dying at such a young age, and so many Black men are, and I hear very little about it, as far as heart issues are concerned. When we looked at the top 10 causes of death in the last 3 years, it's only recently that we start to see Black men, kind of dying more, even more than Black women in regard to that, which is not something I'm, at all celebrating, but acknowledging, because on so many fronts, I see the same dynamic and it continues to happen. So I'm sad to see this young man passing in similar fashion. So, peace to him. And the last thing I wanted to say about it is I don't think I took it off the screen. I actually had IMDb up when I looked at, because I was looking for another picture of him. And I didn't do a super exhaustive search. I went to IMDb or IDBM, I get it mixed up, but I went to the film database website to look him up, and they didn't have another picture of him, which I was a little surprised by. And then I kind of, got caught up looking around the site and forgot what I was looking for. But what I was looking for were other films that he might have been in. Right? And I'm going to pull it up again because I want to see if there's anything I missed. Because he did do an interesting, job, all considering. He did a good job playing the role that he had. And I wanted to see if he might have been something else, in something else, and I just didn't recognize him because, he may have grown older, looked a little different. He might have lost weight. He might have just, played a whole different role. And that tends to happen. Sometimes I'll miss out on somebody because of that. But from what I can tell, Monsters Ball was the only role he played. Right? And IMDb does not have any other image for him. And this is something that bothers me because I think about how much talent that I've seen that virtually disappears in an industry where usually if somebody does a good job in a breakout film, they're offered another role. They're offered an opportunity to build their resume. But when it comes to Black actors with talent, far too often do I never see them again. And it bothers me. And I can't think of a whole lot of examples at the moment. There's only one that pops to mind at the moment. I think of the woman that played Ray's mother or Jamie Foxx playing Ray, his mother in the film Ray. I think about her. She did a powerful job. And I said this last year. I wanted to see her in films like Harriet or whatnot. I thought she would have done a beautiful job, but never heard from her again. And she may have played in more roles than this young man. I'm not sure, but I'm talking about, actors that virtually disappear. So these are the kind of things that just kind of float through my head, in that way. And it makes me even sadder. So it affects me in terms of this young man dying at the age he was. But then it also, kind of upsets me in terms of, untapped talent and a lack of opportunity in regard to that. So 113 watching. Please like, share, subscribe, join and donate. Support the channel if you will, so we can continue to grow. I've kind of not been doing my daily show lately. I'm halfway through the semester. Things are, of course, getting, tight. We're dealing with midterms, and I'm trying to catch up on some grading. So things have been a little tight, but I'm planning to get back on it as soon as I can get things in order. So the more you can support the channel, the more it is appreciated. Now, got a couple of public service announcements. I don't do these often, but sometimes I feel inclined to drop a word on something that I think is important, and that is the case here. Now, although the image on the screen is an image of John Henrik Clarke, this is not really about John Henrik Clarke. This is actually about elders. This past weekend, really, my sister and I, we did a Zoom call with my father. Actually, my father and his best friend from kindergarten, or from the kindergarten age, really. We did a Zoom call with them, and we recorded it, and we interviewed them about their lives. Now, this is something I started doing over a decade ago when my grandmother passed. I actually, I was doing an oral history certificate, while I was finishing up my doctorate, and I started to appreciate oral history. And I started, interviewing people and whatnot. If you look at my blog, newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com, when that started, it was actually an assignment for my students to go out and interview Black men. Well, that whole interviewing bug kind of got to me, and I interviewed my grandmother, and it wasn't long before she passed away. But we interviewed her about her life. And so I was able to give my mother a gift of, this interview that we, recorded on the DVD of her mother talking about her life. Well, we did the same with my father this weekend. And it was an opportunity to find out about him, where he'd been, where he'd grown up. It tends to be a lot of stuff, especially between fathers and sons, that doesn't get said. But, also about the lives of our fathers, what they've been through, what they went through that made, helped them become who they were, what experiences they had that shaped how they look at the world. We're often not privy to that. And I can say, as a father, I now understand why. Because I'm so busy trying to make sure this boy is straight that I'm not thinking of some of the nuances that may be useful to him, some of the stories that I have. I mean, I think I'm telling him something, but, one of the things I noticed my sister and I would always say to my father is, when did that happen? What are you talking about? Because he would just drop things, and we're like, man, I'm 47 years old. I've never heard you say that. And he'll just laugh and be like, oh, well, that was nothing. I'm just like, so you get to this point where after this last year, this whole pandemic, to me, it hits home that much more. The importance of actually sitting down with elders, and I would argue videotaping, an interview about their life. Now you can do it just audio. I'm a visual person. And I do understand that, once people are gone, you don't ever get to see them again the way they're sitting in front of you, So I would argue that the visual is important. But if it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't matter. Just get the interview in. And I'm just saying, you may find years later that you can appreciate something in a whole different way. Because I think about how many family members, especially elders, that just, you get that call at 3 a.m, they passed away. That's a wrap. That's it. And you almost never hear their voice again. You never hear their laugh again, all those kind of things. And so, especially after this last year again, I urge you, sit down with the elders, pull out the video camera, and just ask questions and let them talk. Get them to talk, urge them to talk, tell them your story, get them to tell you their story. And I didn't do it with any judgment. I'm not sitting there, saying you should have done this. Shut up. Just shut up. Let them talk. It may take you years to actually process what they're actually saying. Right? What's up, Norm? I see you. Right? So, just a public service announcement. Elders aren't always here for long. We never know how long any of us are here. It's that much more important to actually get to know the people you care about. So that's the thing for me. And I'm going to be coming at my mother next, but we're just trying to get these in because, like I said, it may not mean that much to you. But can you imagine, waking up a couple decades from now, missing somebody, and then, tripping up on a DVD or a recording and just sitting there, being blown away. And some of the things and stories that, some of the things they'll say, some of the stories they'll tell may resonate with you at a whole different level. You know what I mean? You may actually come to understand them far more later when you have comparable life experience and you can actually hear these things in a different way. So that was my first public service announcement, was just sit down with the elders, get that time in. And ironically enough, so much is being done on, platforms like this and Zoom and so on and so forth. It actually makes it easier to do, especially if you're, long distance away and you can't really get to them right away and you don't know, how much time any of us have. Use the technology if need be, but, find out who they were, hear the stories, listen to them, and get that voice. Because I know some people, you just have a relationship with, where their very voice resonates with you. My father has one of those really deep voices. I've always, wished I had that, right? And when I was a kid, man, he could just call my name and the world ended, man. I mean, if he was upset with me, it was lightning bolts going down my spine. It was the power of his voice, And now that hits different. Like when I think about his voice now, it's not fear, it's love, and how deeply it resonates with me. Because I've always said, one of the things that happens, especially between fathers and sons, a father usually kind of drills into his son his values, his lessons, his worldview, to the point where you as a son begin to hear your father's voice, even when your father isn't there. And then one day, your father's voice becomes your voice. And you can tell yourself what needs to happen. You can drive yourself the way your father used to, or at least mine did, or does, I should say. And then one day you're telling your son what needs to go on. And your son is hearing your voice. And the cycle starts anew. So there's some power into that. That's just it. I don't think it's just me, but if you haven't tried it, do so while you have the chance. Don't ever take it light. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you. The next one has to do with one Terrence J. Actor. Some of you may have seen this. You can find this particular article on theroot.com. Terrence J escapes attempted armed robbery at LA home. Former BET host was ordered out of his vehicle. So it says, while actor Terrence J is taking part in action-packed scenes. Now, let me skip all that. Let me get to the point. Let me see. Real life drama played out. Appreciate that support, Barry. Thank you. Appreciate it. Real life drama played out at his suburban Sherman Oaks home, where he pulled up in the early hours of Wednesday morning and quickly found himself blocked in. In an uptick of follow home robberies in LA County, former 106 & Park host Terrence J, whose full name is Terrence Jenkins, has become one of the city's latest victims. Upon arriving at his home, he and a female passenger were reportedly ordered out of his vehicle by 4 masked men in a silver Jeep Cherokee. Authorities also report that another woman remained locked in a bedroom at Jenkins' home while security alarms were sounding and was unharmed. Jenkins refused to get out of the car, instead choosing to escape the scene by speeding off. While shots were being fired at the vehicle, Jenkins and the passenger also managed to get away without injury. So that the reason I felt the urge to say something about this was because, we're dealing with a time period where things are becoming more and more desperate. Folks are trying to eat on one level or another. And as things tend to go that way, people find more and more creative ways to eat, so to speak. So follow home robberies was just something I wanted to kind of put in your hat, just something to give you, just a reminder. I don't care if you're at the gas station, a restaurant, you're at a meeting somewhere. Try and just spend a little time, looking behind you, just, double checking. May not be something you can prevent, maybe something you can, never know. But just to put that in your cap, just to remind you, shit is real out here. It's real. You need to do what you can to protect yourself, but you never know which way this is going to go. So, I thought this situation with Terrence J was a good reminder about what can happen and the importance of us being careful, right? And usually, as men in particular, we find ourselves in a mode of being protective of those that we care about. So part of that protection is being aware of what can happen. So again, just keeping you on your feet, y'all. Stay up, you know, be mindful of what's going on. Yeah. So shout out to a number of people. I see a few people coming in here. What's up, Abuki Cabal? Y'all check out Abuki's channel. You know, he's constantly dropping some important information. So make sure you go to his YouTube channel and check out. I think he dropped 2 videos in the last few days. So please go check him out. I hope you're well, brother. It's good to see you in here. What's up, JC, JJ Mars, Eric? What's going on? Yeah. So Brandon, what's the word? I see a few of y'all in here. Thank you. So we're gonna get into it. Let me go ahead and transition this here a little bit. Yeah. So we're talking about media wars, colonial agents, Concu-serfs, and the Black Gynocracy. And this is part 3. Now, why do I call it part 3? Well, part of the reason I'm calling it part 3 is because I've introduced this term of colonial agents, and I'm talking about not, you know, it's not so much about individual Black women. It's about the social conditioning that Black women have. Now, Black men are socially conditioned as well. Our social conditioning, however, is more along the lines of disposability. You know, at one point, we were at least valuable in terms of free labor. Now, with automation, I don't even know how much that's the case. But at the end of the day, we've never really been socialized much more outside of disposability. You have individual Black men that find themselves in positions of authority or achievement, but at the end of the day, we weren't really anticipated in that way. Positions we achieve in spite of, not because of anybody, going out their way to find Black men and give them opportunities. That's not how it is. So I'm not suggesting that Black women are socially conditioned and Black men aren't. We're just conditioned differently. And I argue that her conditioning, especially when we talk about the gynocracy, is a little different. Hers, it comes with a degree of investment in a system that gives her access to things that many Black men, never seen, not in terms of their own experience. So the first installment of this conversation, I talked about, early 19th century ideas about gender roles and the ways in which those ideas were absorbed in a very schizophrenic and problematic way into the Black community, particularly along the lines of women who had a degree of incentive and material incentive at that to operate with some investment, operate with an idea that she could access society. She could access some degree of middle-class life, right? That was the first show. The second show, we talked a little bit more about the degree to which she's able to function, right? Especially in terms of abusing the right to abuse, right? In other words, the way she's able to access society and use the kind of practices that go on in ways that others can't. So we talked a lot about abuse, and I showed a number of examples about abuse that are, by and large, or that tend to go unrecognized. Today, we're going to go a little in a different direction. I saw a number of articles that I've been seeing for years in a certain kind of way, but I thought it important that we actually look at. All right. One of those articles I want to start off with here had to do with something I presented on a while ago. Let me see if I can share this screen. I believe I should be able to. Let's see here. All right. Let's go with that there. All right. So this was a piece I talked about before. And the thing about it is you'll find this article on a lot of different websites. It got a lot of play a few months ago. You can see dated in April. And I did a video on it in April talking about it because it was really strange. And I'll show you why in a second. It's entitled, obviously, Black Women Dying of COVID at Higher Rates Than White Men, right? And when you scroll down, there's an important, couple sentences that I want to highlight. So the first sentence reads, the analysis by Harvard's Gender Sci Lab found that COVID death rates among Black women are nearly 4 times higher than those for white men. 3 times higher than for Asian men, and also higher than for white and Asian women. And then there's one sentence in there that throws all of this into a strange space, kind of Twilight Zone-ish, if you will. The next sentence reads, COVID death rates among Black men are far higher than for any other sex and racial group, including more than 6 times higher than for white men. Now, what's interesting about that is it means that Black men's rates are higher than everybody's, including Black women's. But strangely enough, the Gender Sci Lab didn't find Black men as a gender worthy of talking about. So what does the article highlight? Right? Is the conversation focused on the group that is suffering the most? Or does it bypass them for some strange reason? And I said this before, the Gender Sci Lab, right? Just like when you talk about gender studies, most of the time, most institutions don't consider men to be part of the gender, right? Gender is synonymous with women institutionally. Now, we know theoretically that's not the case, at least in concept, but realistically speaking, even when you take these courses in gender studies and you talk about gender theory, men, especially heterosexual men, not really part of the discussion unless you're talking about them in problematic ways, unless you're talking about them as the source of injustice for other groups. So this is one of the things I wanted to talk about today. When we talk about media wars, I'm not talking about television shows, movies, and there's plenty to talk about. I don't have a problem with doing that. Y'all know I do movie reviews and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying that's not important. What I am saying is the very particular type of media wars I'm looking at today actually have to do with the underdevelopment of Black men. They actually have to do with anti-Black misandry, or misandry as a whole as far as men are concerned, in media, but particularly media that points to serious issues, media that's considered intellectual in its framework, right? The ways in which even in the ivory tower, misandry is well accepted, so much so that it's not a term that's studied to any great length outside of Black male studies. You won't find institutes framed around misandry. You won't find a whole lot of theoretical work around misandry. You'll find the same names dealing with misandry, and it's a very short list. And it usually has to do more so with anti-Black misandry. And that has to do more with the works of people like Dr. Tommy Curry, right? And if you come to YouTube, you'll hear brothers like Green Gorilla, Dr. Ronald Neal, you'll hear BGS Ibmore, you'll hear myself talk about anti-Black misandry. But again, not a frequently used term, even in the academy, right? And that's kind of one of the things I want to point out here. Because when we start to talk about gynocracy, when we start to talk about colonial agents, what I'm saying is part of the reason that they're able to function that way, right, is because when we look at the ways in which men are underdeveloped and sidelined, there's no discussion about it, even amongst the intelligentsia. So this is just the first article. So this is one that we looked at a couple months ago. Here's another. So this one came out a few days ago. It lined up here. And it is entitled Adultification Bias. Adultification Bias, right? Investigation finds most children subjected to police violence are Black boys and girls. Seems harmless enough. Could have said Black children, but doesn't matter. It's not a big issue. I was actually a little surprised they mentioned boys. So this comes out November 15th. So it's very new, right? I posted this on my, my Facebook page. And sometimes I like to do that just to see what the conversation is about it. So it talks a little bit about adultification. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I'm going to see if I can pull out some choice moments. But the beginning paragraph reads, Black girls are at an increased risk of being harmed by police officers. Now, this is important. This is what set me off. When I first read it, I saw the title, and the title to me was, wow, okay, adultification. I know how important that is. I know how Black boys can tend to be looked at as adults, even as young or older than they are. Excuse me. These aligners sometimes make it hard to speak. Anyway, Black boys can be seen as older than they are as young as 4 and 5 years old, and they can be seen as adults even in their early teens. But when it said Black boys and girls, I'm like, yeah, that's important. I'm glad we did that. But by the time you get to the very first sentence, you immediately see where the politics are, right? Black girls are at an increased risk of being harmed by police officers in investigation by the social justice focused newsroom the Marshall Project has found. I thought, okay, that's familiar. And I immediately thought of the piece that I just showed you on COVID and COVID deaths. Like, this is interesting. What's going on here, right? And matter of fact, yesterday, as I was preparing for today, I was watching one of Antonio Moore's, actually his latest video came out yesterday, in fact, and he did a live responding to an article on Black women dating down. And this was an article in The Atlantic. And I thought, this is interesting. Okay, so he's doing a second week on it. I'm like, all right, let me check it out. And of course, Moore is very good dealing with the data on, our economic status and whatnot. But one of the things that frustrated him about the piece was that this was fairly high level, right? A high level media magazine online that was dealing with this idea of Black women dating down by dating Black men, even though for the most part, the majority of Black America is wealthless. And Moore talks about this all the time. The majority of our wealth isn't in the celebrity class. It isn't in the entertainment class. It's really amongst baby boomers with a home and a pension. That's the majority of our wealth. And, as far as the African-American community is concerned, right? So he was talking about how problematic it was that you actually have this article that's somehow suggesting that Black women are in some economic stratosphere that Black men are nowhere near. And that's hardly the case. If anything, if you look at the BLS data, Black men earn more from 18 to 65 for those that are employed. What throws us off is that Black men earn less when you account for incarceration. Like, we're the only group of men that earn less, due to incarceration. Short of incarceration, we actually earn a little bit more. It's not dramatic, but it's a little more. But my point in bringing this up is that none of the data justifies an article in The Atlantic talking about Black women dating down. If anything, it contributes to this ongoing narrative that somehow Black men are inherently deficient and Black women are inherently superior simply because they have vaginas. Whatever it is. But that's not the point I'm even bringing up in terms of Moore and his video. The point I'm bringing up is by the time he gets a few callers into his show, he encounters a couple of different women calling in, basically suggesting that either on one level, this is kind of true enough to take into account, or more importantly, right, that Black men and Black women are talking about each other in negative ways on equal terrain. And Moore said something very interesting. He said, "Ma'am, you're not going to find Black men writing articles in The Atlantic about dating down when it comes to Black women. You're not going to find Black men at the Washington Post, New York Times, LA. You're not going to find them on major platforms." And Kevin Samuel's name kept coming up. And, Moore, he kind of dodged having to deal with Kevin directly. And of course, we know why. The high value man idea is not going to appeal to someone that knows, someone like Moore, who talks a lot about Black poverty. But he said something vital that I think is important to this discussion today. He said, you have Black men on YouTube, and I'm going to fill in here, who are building their platforms by themselves. There's no capital behind them. There's no corporation behind them. Like I said earlier in the show, I got to 20,000 subscribers. That is a year and a half of busting my ass. And even that's lucky. Because you can be on YouTube for 2 years and have 200 subscribers. It is what it is. There's no guarantee, no matter how much production value you put behind yourself, whether or not your channel is going to take off. There are no guarantees. Hell, even Kevin, he's got over 1 million subscribers. I see white boys on YouTube with 4 and 5 million who aren't saying anything. Right? And that's not to take away from his efforts. It's simply to say that a lot of this is relative. But when you compare individual Black men on social media to The Atlantic, Moore had an excellent point. He said, you're not going to find Black men who are being elevated and platformed by corporations, by platforms that are old and well ensconced in society, well respected, right? You're not going to find Black men accessing those platforms and talking down about Black women. We just don't, that's not happening. And one of the other things he pointed out about that is he said the article was actually written by a Caucasian man, but it was in response to a demand from Black women. And that was the key component. And what you saw in his face was the frustration of hearing women calling in and saying, well, I hear black men on YouTube saying things about black women. And then you got articles like this. So it's a wash. It's all the same. It's like, no. A dude on his smartphone on YouTube is not the same as a hit piece about, really targeting black men on the Atlantic with the support of black women readers. Matter of fact, at their behest. Two different things. Now, what does that have to do with today? What does that have to do with this article I'm about to get into and what else I'm about to talk to you about? Well, again, the article that came out on COVID and black deaths, black women's deaths, came out of Harvard's Gender Sci Lab. And that article in itself, you can find all over the net, everywhere. Reputable spots, journals, academic journals, places you never heard of. One sentence on how black men die even more than black women. I only heard one other article last year that even said that, and that one disappeared. So basically, two articles where it was listed. One article that was actually about black men, and the other article where black men were a footnote to the article, essentially. And yet, even the evidence coming out of Harvard suggested they die more than anybody. And nobody gave a damn. Nobody. So here we are talking about adultification, and this is an important issue, but yet and still, the very first line of the article lets you know, right, why this is an issue. Black girls are at increased risk. Now, it's not to say that I don't believe black women and girls should be talked about. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is if we know who's actually suffering from something, wouldn't they be the point of the article? You would think. So let's continue. Let's see. The investigation included an analysis of demographic and use of force data from 6 police departments and found that the majority of the 4,000 children subjected to police violence between 2015 and 2020 were black. About 1/5 of the children were black girls, while 3% were white girls. So 6 police departments, only 6 police departments, which I already find somewhat interesting. 4,000 children, okay, 4,000 children. 1/5 black girls. All right, interesting. All right, let me see. He talked about in New Orleans, every girl, including the database, had been subjected to physical force, and they were all black. Okay, important, interesting. No question about that. I don't have a problem with it. More than half of the 4,000 children impacted by police violence in the investigation were black boys. Interesting. Hold on. Shout out to Norman on the Venmo and Jay on the Cash App. Appreciate that support. But this is interesting to me. More than half of the 4,000 children impacted by police violence in the investigation were black boys, at a count of 2,200. Now, wait a minute. Am I missing something? This is strangely reminiscent. Strangely reminiscent. Y'all tell me what's going on here. You look at that. What am I missing? I mean, there's an acknowledgement that black boys are in this situation, just like in the COVID article. They're mentioned. And it's always this strange little, one sentence. Right? This strange little one sentence that you can see where, black boys are mentioned, but that's it. Nothing beyond that. And I find that problematic and questionable. Get this video out of here. Yeah. But this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. It makes you wonder, where is this coming from? What exactly is the idea that's being promoted here? What's the goal of all of this? Right? So more than half of the 4,000 children impacted by police investigation were black boys. But the very first sentence of the article, which frames what the focus of it is black girls are at an increased risk of being harmed. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with pointing that out, but clearly, if black boys are on the receiving end of this more, right? Because out of those 4,000 children, what did they tell us? They said that 1/5 of the children were black girls. So 1/5 of the children were black girls, more than half were black boys. And what is the focus of the article? Studies have routinely shown that both Black girls and boys are seen as older than their same age peers. Research published by the American Psychological Association found that Black boys as young as 10 years old are seen as being responsible for their actions, while white boys of the same age are still viewed as generally innocent children. In 2017 and 2019, Georgetown's University Center on Poverty and Inequality found that Black girls are more likely to be subjected to adultification bias. Research showed that Black girls as young as 5 are assumed to need less protection and nurturing than white girls of the same age. Now, this is an important distinction. This is important. You will sometimes hear out of nowhere, right, sentences like this, right? Georgetown University's Center on Poverty and Inequality found that Black girls are more likely to be subjected to adultification bias. You'll also hear those kind of sentences when it comes to other things we're going to point out later. And they'll just kind of pop out of nowhere. They'll not be framed in any kind of real way. It'll just say they're more subject to it. But then at the end of the same paragraph, what they're more subject to, it just basically means that they're subject to it more than white girls. So Black boys will be subject to something more than everybody. Black girls, when you hear these kind of sentences, are often subject to it more than their female counterparts. And I don't mind that we draw those distinctions out. And I'm not saying we need to eliminate what Black girls are going through, or Black women for that matter. I have a problem with the framing of the article. And I have a problem with who gets access to being able to have these articles discussed on major platforms and who is virtually ignored or is a footnote in a problem that he suffers from more than anyone else. I have a problem with that. I'm not only, a former Black boy myself, I have a Black boy son. So when I hear these kind of distinctions being made and not qualified, and it's done with a degree of manipulation, that sentence, they are subjected to, Black girls are more likely to be subjected to it. That's right there a problem, because the way they're framing that. Golden Child, appreciate that support. Let me see. Let me put in. So Golden Child says the funny thing about Tone Talks is that when he talks about Black male, Black female relationships, he doesn't sound much different than Dr. Johnson, BGS, or even Kevin Samuel. He probably would agree with most of what you have to say. Yes and no. I think part of the difference there is that when you're talking about ADOS, particularly organizationally, a lot of it tends to depend on Black women. Tone been talking like that for the longest. He's been talking like that longer than Kevin Samuels had a channel, and he actually pointed that out yesterday. And he's right. He has been. He's been talking like that for years, and we would normally call it red pill, but he's maintained an arm's length distance from other aspects of the online community for his own reasons. I think part of that is probably not wanting to offend his Black female listeners more often than not. But, when he does do these relationship analyses, he doesn't use the same talking points. He doesn't use the same terms we've developed. But when you listen to the argument, yeah. But anyway, getting back to this, what I'm pointing out is just the manipulative way that the data is being presented and the platforms that allow this to occur, while also leaving Black boys and men to serve as footnotes on issues they suffer from most. Let's see. And this is also what I mean when I use terms like flat blackness. Now, again, flat blackness is not a term that I created. Right. And often when I heard the term being used, it had more to do with the differences between, Black immigrants, ADOS or FBA Black folk here. That's where I heard the term initially used. Black Uru, what's up in here, man? I didn't see you in here. What's going on? Let me see. My mouse keeps disappearing. There we go. That says, always good to see Black Uru in here. He says it's not a coincidence the article is stated that way to set the mind of the reader. We remember the first and last sections of what we need. Absolutely. Absolutely. And these major platforms are hardly oblivious to that. They are well aware of how people read. They study how people read. You got to know the ins and outs of your business, and they are well aware how this reads, and they do it purposely, no doubt. But so anyway, when I talk about flat blackness, I bring the gender component to it because I started to notice something in the Black community, most especially right around the time we started to see a rise in BLM and other similar organizations. And what I noticed was Black men's numbers, the numbers for what we suffer from, whether it's adultification, whether it's COVID, whether it's incarceration, whether it's poverty and homelessness, unemployment, whatever it is, I found that the numbers, right, that reflect the empirical data that reflect Black male life were, how would I put it, used it to great detail when it came to attracting attention to Black issues. But then there'd be a very particular kind of bait and switch that would happen, somewhat like this article, where the conversation would immediately switch to a demographic in the community that has less of an experience with something, but they're trying to transfer in some of the equity from Black men's experiences to add value to shifting the discourse to their experience. Again, I don't have a problem with us talking about Black women and girls going through something, but I do have a problem with the manipulative use of the Black male experience only to leave Black men themselves as footnotes or completely absent from the discussion as soon as you've gotten the attention you need or choose to want. That's the problem I have with it. And these kind of articles are problematic like that. So when I talk about flat Blackness, I'm not talking about immigrants and ADOS. There are people that do that. I'm talking about the ways in which Black men's experiences are used to attract attention and Black men are discarded once the bait and switch can occur and the conversation can now be refocused on Black women and girls. And this is not an easy discussion to have because coming up in the Black community from the 70s to now, we were initially taught that Black is Black. We talk about the Black community kind of as this homogenous entity. But then as we started to get to gender ended up becoming solely women and girls, and LGBT kind of popped out of that and were able to kind of build out of there. And somehow talking about Black men became synonymous with patriarchy and negativity and toxicity. And then there was these recasts of the 60s and 70s activist era as nothing but misogynist spaces where men just dominated and oppressed women and girls. And then you started to hear post 2015 that we need to have organizations led by women and LGBT because Black men owed those two groups because of how oppressive they were, and they needed to step back and let those groups lead, and they need to be silent and follow. You started to hear all of that. But one of the ways these groups maintained getting people attracted to what they were talking about was to first lead with Black male deaths. That's what got people's attention. And then they switched the conversation. And so we're still seeing that, right? So this sentence reads, the APA study found that among police officers in urban areas, overestimating a person's age based on racial stereotypes was associated with dehumanizing stereotypes, which were then linked to increased violent encounters with Black children in custody. Black children in custody. This is interesting because when you look at the video Dennis Sperling played a little bit earlier, the interview he and I did a while ago, he just replayed it before my show today. One of the things I said in that interview is if you're talking about an issue and the group that suffers from it the least is foregrounded in the discussion, there's probably something wrong with that. And the example I gave was breast cancer. We know roughly about 2 to 4% of breast cancer patients or breast cancer victims, or whatever term you want to use, in the Black community, especially among adults, of course, are Black men. But Black men are never the face of breast cancer. It's an issue that overwhelmingly women suffer from. And what I find interesting is there's never a push to focus on Black men and boys, especially in areas where they are the least to suffer, like breast cancer, right? We don't talk about that. That's not part of the discussion. We don't make Black men the face of breast cancer, and I'm not arguing we should. In fact, I do think Black women should be the face of it because they suffer from it far more. But strangely enough, it's okay to remove Black men from actually being the face of what they experience the most. It's okay to remove their face because by the way, they're just oppressive, they're just toxic patriarchs and whatever. And then we have all these kind of, rhetorical dismissals of the Black male experience that sound justified, especially if you've taken a few courses and been indoctrinated into gender. If you've taken a few courses and learned enough about gender studies, that somehow it's acceptable to erase Black men and to do so with a certain vigor, a certain excitement, right? So when I see terms like Black children, yeah, I get why they're using it because the article highlights how both Black boys and girls suffer from adultification. But first of all, you got a study that only grabs 6 police departments, and it's only focusing on 4,000 kids. But all right, 4,000 is a fairly good sample, but only 6 police departments it's already suggests you kind of doing something with the numbers, but whatever. But even out of that 4,000 kids, it's only a fifth of girls and over half of boys. Now remember something, right? Black community, roughly 13% of society. We're fairly small. Fairly small. Black boys, black girls, not a huge percentage of America, right? But yet and still, when you have such a small group where the boys are over half of the group that's targeted and the girls are a fifth, black boys can't even be the face of that. They can't be the focus. So now we're talking about black children. And this is what I meant by flat blackness, right? That's what I meant by flat blackness. You flatten out the experience to where now all of a sudden everything's the same, right? Because black girls and boys both suffer from it. It's just a black children issue. Just like I was saying earlier with the magazine, with the article in the Atlantic that Moore was dealing with. Right? Well, you got men on YouTube talking mess about women, and you got women in the Atlantic talking mess and doing it by proxy through white men, and it's all the same. No, it's not the same. It's not the same by any measure. But it's acceptable as long as we have a dynamic that supports the disproportionate representation of women and girls at the expense of boys and men. Right? All right, let me see. Here we go. So here's another sentence. Although black boys are more likely than all other children to face discipline through suspensions, expulsions, and school arrests, the disparity in disciplinary action between black and white girls is larger than that between black and white boys. The paper found that in New York, black girls were 11 times more likely to be suspended than their white peers. Now, I want you to see the kind of tap dancing that's going on here, or I should say the gymnastics. I want you to see the kind of mental gymnastics that are going on here, right? So they admit at the beginning, and it sounds like they're being truthful, right? Black boys more likely than all other children to face discipline through suspensions, expulsions, and school arrests. The disparity in disciplinary action between black and white girls is larger, right? So really the focus of the sentence is how much larger the disparity is between black and white girls who are punished. And essentially what that means in a nutshell is that white boys get in more trouble than white girls. And so because there's a disparity that highlights the differences that much more between white girls and black girls, that's the problem. But I want to show you something. This is a piece I did on my blog a few years ago, right? Right. And in this piece, I highlighted some information. So I want you to look at this chart. I want you to see. The chart is entitled Look at Race and Gender Out of School Suspensions. African American boys and girls have higher suspension rates than any of their peers. 1 in 5 African American boys and more than 1 in 10 African American girls receive an out of school suspension. Again, am I saying black girls shouldn't be talked about or any other group? No, not at all. However, the bait and switch is my issue. The politics, right, is my issue. The agenda behind how the articles are framed is my issue. And ultimately, the disposal of even the conversation around black boys and how they're treated is my major issue. So if you look at this chart here, when it's talking about out of school suspensions, and we can do the same thing with, some of the other areas that they've raised in the article, from detentions to in-class punishments. We can do the same thing. And I'm a teacher. I've experienced this. I've taught elementary, junior high, high school, college. Taught at every level. And I've seen it. Right? But anyway, my point here is that black males are almost double everybody in terms of suspensions. Think it's any different for expulsions? I remember being in a fairly high achieving black boy as far as grades. I was one of those that didn't have to try very hard. Grades came easy, and that's not always the best thing, because it usually means, and I've seen this in college, when you are challenged, you don't know how to deal with it, because school is always, whatever has always come easy to you, by the time you got to work for it, you kind of take it for granted. So it's not always a good thing to say things come easy to you. But school, for the most part, did come easy to me. And I remembered how many teachers saw me as something different, saw me as a problem. even though I didn't do anything. And I always thought there was something wrong with me. And when I became a father and I took my son in, and again, I shared this in the interview with Attorney Sperling. I won't take up too much time with it here. And I've told this story before. By the second week of school, they wanted to put my son in special ed. A year later, this kid was reading 700-page Harry Potter books on his own, but he needed to be in special ed. See, that revealed what the data has already shown. It didn't have anything to do with academic ability. It didn't have anything to do with academic ability. It had more to do with implicit bias. But the point I'm making here is when we see that when it comes to suspensions, Black boys, and if you can't see the screen clearly, right, or can't see it at all, if you're on the radio listening to me, Black boys on this chart are the red line. And basically it shows that they have rates of up to 20% in regard to suspension. The second highest group are American Indian boys at 12%. Among the girls, Black women are at 11%. Now that is higher than all the other girls, and it's almost twice as high as white girls. But it's almost half of Black boys. Now, the way that other sentence I read earlier was framed, I want you to hear how it is while looking at this chart. It was framed by saying Black girls are disproportionately subject to X, Y, and Z. When in actuality, what they're saying is they're subjected to it in relation to white girls. They've completely eliminated the other half of the chart. And this happens a lot. I used to see it with this group called the African American Policy Forum, which is basically, an intersectionalist organization, is code for a Black feminist organization. The name doesn't tell you that. It sounds very official, So anything you see coming out of them, you're going to think is official. And they used to release stuff like this. Girls are disproportionately affected by X. But what they leave off is compared to their female peers. They did not want to compare it to the experiences of boys, most particularly Black boys. And so now you have a Black organization that is putting out information on what we need to pay attention to and what's important in the community that's not being given enough light, actively sidestepping and suppressing information about boys. Yeah. Full of academics that have no problem with it. Because fundamentally, we're taught in gender studies that because Black boys or Black men die more, or at least are acknowledged, quote unquote, for dying more, that's a form of privilege. And so in essence, we hear 2 or 3 names a year and we talk about that. And we low-key shame men for the fact that, there's 2 or 3 names that we hear every year, Black males who are killed by police officers or vigilantes, and that's a bad thing. And while I'm not opposed by any means to talking about Black women that experience this, I do also understand, because of the disparity in numbers, it's actually ridiculous to have the conversation that we're having the way it's being framed. If you just say to me, if you list off, people that have been killed, cool, we can talk about that. But when you purposely sidestep the men or downplay, like sometimes I'll hear commercials, sometimes, and they'll it might be BLM commercials, and they'll list like 4 people, 2 women, 2 men. I'm like, okay, who've been killed by police officers. I get the point. I understand the politics, but you also understand on the low end, because these reports are very low. They're downplayed. The numbers are low. But even with the numbers not being fully reported, we know Black men tend to die in numbers of 200 to 300 per year at the hands of police officers. That doesn't include vigilantes, and it doesn't really, in my opinion, include all of the police murders. But the point is, 200 to 300 a year. Black women around 9 to 13. So when you suggest that 2 men and 2 women have died, it's kind of a problem. It takes us back to that breast cancer issue. That's like if I'm going to do a breast cancer commercial and I'm going to talk about 2 men and 2 women that died of breast cancer. Word. There's a dishonesty in that. But see, if I turn around and say to you, well, this is a disrespect to this gentleman who died of breast cancer. How dare you suggest that I not mention him? Now I look like a jerk. Now I look like I'm insensitive. But realistically, the issue is when you look at the numbers, not really male issue, at least not one that I think should supersede who suffers from it more. And that being said, again, not trying to silence the experience of women and girls, but I do believe we need to start putting these things in better context, because there's some dishonesty in how some of this is being presented. Okay, so let's go to another one. This one I tripped into a little while ago. Now, I actually want to start out. Hold on. I want to start out by showing you something. Yeah, all right. It's on the screen. So, this is the caption for the article that we're going to look at, right? About 120 Black women were lynched in the U.S. from 1865 to 1965, right? And they list the women. And that's important that we talk about that. Have no problem with that, right? 246 watching. Please like, share, subscribe. I've been shadow banned. Again, some of it is YouTube. Some of it is probably my fault because I haven't been doing daily videos anymore. But if you could support the channel, hit the like button, donate, support the channel, I'd really appreciate it, because I have to build up my audience again. So, I'm not even sure how many of you knew today's episode was jumping off. Anyway, but it's highlighting the names of the Black women that were killed, even to the point of listing unnamed person, right? 120 Black women. But, right? And see, this is part of the issue, because it looks like I don't care, and that's not it at all. Not it at all. But the title says history focuses on men, but Black women were lynched too. Between 1865 and 1965, there were nearly 5,000 racial terror lynchings of Black people. Approximately 120 of those victims were Black women. This is coming from the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. Came out 2 days ago. 2 days ago, in fact. Right? And so it starts out by listing some of the stories, right? About Negro women who were lynched. And this is horrible. Absolutely horrible. But then you get to this, this little area, and I thought it was interesting to read. It continues with what we saw at the title of the article. It says between 1865 and 1965, there were nearly 5,000 racial terror lynchings of Black people, according to a Howard Center analysis of the Beck-Tolnay inventory of Southern lynch victims and the Seguin-Rigby National Data Set of lynchings in the United States. Approximately 120 of those victims, about 3%, were Black women. Right. When I ask my students how many Black men they can remember who've been lynched, I want to know by number in the chat, how many do you think they can list by name? Put the number in the chat. How many Black men do you think? Now, I'm not talking about after my class is over. I'm talking about the beginning of the semester. When I ask, how many Black men can you remember by name who were lynched in this country? I want you guys in the chat to list the number you think they can remember. I see 3, I see 0, I see 1s. More zeros, more 1s. Zeros, 1s. Some said 3, some said 4, some said 10, 2, 1. The answer is 0. After we have a discussion and I play a film, depending on which class you're in, I play a film in my writing class on Emmett Till. That number goes from 0 to 1. So I want to be clear about something. When we talk about inclusion, right? As far as deaths, as far as, negative experiences in society, one of the things I really kind of want us to understand is we frame this first as a problem that somehow Black men are contributing to and are privileged by because they're remembered. And just like with annual police killings, the reality is they're actually remembered at a lower rate. Because again, you're only talking about 9 to 13 women a year and 200 to 300 Black men. So the 1 to 3 names that you hear per year, and really that's not even how it works. What generally ends up happening is people will point out 5 names over the last, or maybe 3 names over the last 5 years, right? So if you take 5 years, right, and people will point out anywhere from 3 to 5 names. If you take 5 years, you're talking where about anything from 1,000, from 500. No, I'm sorry, 2 to 300. So 1,000, right, and up. Let's just stop at 1,000. So in 5 years, you got about 1,000 Black male deaths at the low end. People remember, if you're lucky, 3 to 5 at best. And that's privilege, that they're remembered. I put a list up of the 5,000 names, and don't get it twisted. I think that number is hella low. Now I got my Bay Area coming out. That number is really low. But let's say it's accurate. You stick at 5,000, and I actually listed the names of all the 5,000 Black folk who have been killed. I wonder how many people listening on YouTube would even know. Appreciate that support, man, Friday. How many on YouTube would know any of those names other than, say, Emmett Till? And shout out to Mamie Till, his mother, who had the courage to put her son on the cover of Jet magazine. I don't know how many parents would have had that kind of strength. That took a lot. Shout out to her for that. Interesting question, though. Do you guys think do you guys think Emmett would be remembered if that didn't occur? If he wasn't on a magazine cover? Looking like the most, I mean, for those of you that may not have seen the image of Emmett Till, doesn't look human. Looks like a prop somebody made for a horror film. To this day. Right? Yeah. Quantum Blackness just said it in the comment section. 5,000, and I can only name one offhand. Yeah. It's not, that's not abnormal. And we only remember that one because he was in a magazine. And to this day, we don't see a lot of death on magazine covers, especially for mainstream, or at least, magazines that are considered respectful and so on and so forth. So again, for me, it's not that it's done, it's how it's done. It's not that we're talking about Black girls who are experiencing adultification or experiencing high rates of expulsion or suspension or having been lynched historically. It's not that we're talking about it that I have a problem with. It's how the conversation's being framed. One, that Black men are somehow to be shamed and punished as if we control any of these media networks, but to the extent that we want to talk about Black men, and that's in the circles that we actually do want to talk about those, that somehow is some kind of a bad thing that we do, even when the numbers are overwhelmingly tipped to Black males' detriment. There's still a punishing kind of narrative at play. And the second issue I have is that the response to that punishment is carried out on major platforms that the average Black male has no access to, that Black men as a collective have no access to. Whether we're talking about Harvard, the Atlantic, Time Magazine, you go on. I mean, we talked about Time Magazine last summer, right? We were in the middle of all of these uprisings happening all over the country. We started getting these paintings, right? We had Black women in these championed heroic positions and Black men in the back sweeping up. That was the depiction. Even though the people that folks were rioting over most were Black men who were dying on fucking camera. Killed like animals. Appreciate the support, Mr. Z. And their deaths were enough to attract attention because it was titillating to see these black men die, choked to death, shot, mangled, beaten, whatever. It was interesting. It was titillating. That's what got people's attention. And then when people were paying attention, black men were in the back sweeping up. Or they were being told they couldn't serve in positions of leadership because apparently of how sexist their fathers and grandfathers were decades ago. And there's plenty of dispute about that in and of itself, but it supports this overarching idea that men were inherently sexist, inherently abusive, and that's always been the case since the beginning of time. And therefore, we got to get back at men by foregrounding women and girls, and that's just the equation we work with. But when you start bringing up numbers, now it's a problem. When you start finding out that, the periods in time where women were supposedly abused to the greatest extent actually included men, or in many ways found that men had higher numbers of deaths, now all of a sudden there's a silence. But notice I picked articles where they did tell you in some kind of footnoted fashion in most cases, yeah, we know black men suffer from that more. We know black boys suffer from that more. Here it is, one line. Surprised it wasn't listed at the bottom of the screen in small type, to be honest with you. I really am. But this is what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at. Appreciate that support. Grade I9. Thank you. So let me see. Here's another. And I wanted to kind of point out. And this is not necessarily the same kind of thing, but it was an observation that came from one of my Facebook friends, Quiz the Poet, I think he calls himself. And it was in response to this article here. This is on Atlanta Black Star. It's entitled BLM Activist Threatens to Riot If New York Mayor-elect Eric Adams Reinstates Plainclothes Street Units. NYPD wants to label him a domestic terrorist in response. This is an article that deals with one gentleman named Hawk Newsom, co-founder of the BLM of Greater New York, right? And that's a picture of him on the screen right there, right? And so we started to talk about him on Facebook, right? Because of this article, we were starting to look at it, and, we were having discussions about, of course, BLM and the role of black men. And Quiz said to me, he said, well, I thought you said that black men in general didn't hold positions of leadership in BLM. I said, in general, they don't. He said, well, how do you basically explain this? I said, well, keep in mind, there are black men who created their own chapters, but aren't recognized by the official organization, especially when they actually call into question how the funding is being distributed, right? High rates of funding we saw, I think it was like 90 million just last year. But, one of the things I pointed out about that was, this kind of notion, and I don't know Hawk Newsom. I'm not talking about him in any positive or negative way. I'm just simply acknowledging that he is a black male that leads a BLM chapter, and he's going through this particular issue in New York, according to this article. So when I mentioned it to Quiz, and we talked about black men leading in the organization, despite that they generally don't, I pointed out that, many of these chapters are unofficial. And it turns out that, BLM leadership quickly made statements, right, that his chapter is not recognized, right? That his chapter is not recognized as far as the formal BLM network is concerned. Let me see. I posted a quote from it. I don't remember if it was from this particular article. Hold on one second. Let's see. I don't remember if it was from this article or not, or if I went to go look for him. That's right. I looked up Hawk Newsom, so it wasn't in this article. But one of the things it pointed out was that BLM quickly disassociated themselves from him, right? So it kind of reinforced the whole point about black men, right? And Quiz said something that just gave me pause. He said, so, it's kind of like saying, so what you're saying is outgroup males ran outgroup chapters to an organization built on the backs of dead outgroup males. Got it. Thanks, Doc. Outgroup males ran outgroup chapters to an organization built on the backs of dead outgroup males. My only response was, goddamn. Now, if you're not familiar with the terminology as far as outgroup as a term, we're referencing social dominance theory. We're referencing Jim Sedanius's work, where he pointed out that the treatment of males, right, especially outgroup males, groups of men who are not considered part of the dominant group, is usually more intense and more unjust than even the women in the outgroup dynamic. And he pointed this at not using solely race as a dynamic. He studied this in a variety of different contexts. Whenever you have one group dominate another, it tends to be the males, the outgroup males, that are targeted the most. And that's what Quiz was focusing on in this section. The ways in which, in this instance, Black men have to actually roll, the way they have to function in order to participate in a movement started on the deaths of Black men. They have to become renegades in a movement that has to do with their own deaths. So shout out to Quiz the Poet for that. It gave me a moment of pause because it hit me in the chest to hear it put like that. So again, this is Hawk Newsom. This is, I don't know much about him as an individual. I'm not really talking about him, but I am using him as an example in a very powerful way, I think. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to allow a couple people to pop up. This will be very short. So just kind of, if you have something you want to say, just, keep it direct, straightforward. And give me your comments about what we're talking about today. I just dropped a link in the comments for those who are on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch. Pop up, be succinct, be to the point, give a few people an opportunity to say something. Again, we're focused on the topic. This is not, just a free-for-all as far as any subject, but we're talking particularly about this issue of the baiting and switching of Black male underdevelopment across a variety of issues, and the ways in which, so-called upstanding mainstream media platforms contribute to the dynamic. What are your thoughts about it? What do you think? What's going on? Have you seen this in other areas? What are your thoughts about what you've seen tonight? Especially if you hadn't read any of these articles. What are your thoughts about them? If no one wants to come up, it's all good. There's no pressure. But I think I got people were writing me the last couple shows because I went on so long. I didn't bring people up. So I said, well, my apologies. So let me make sure I do. Let me bring up Brother Ian. What's up, man?
Peace, God. How you doing, bro?
Man, I'm good, man. How about yourself, man? What's going on with you?
I'm great. Not much, man. I love the story about you and your father.
Oh, thank you.
That was that needs to be said, and you need to say that more often and remind us of that.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, because in addition to our deaths going unnoticed, I mean, our whole lives and experiences are going, and our wisdom is going unnoticed too.
Yeah.
And that is, and when you talk about generational wealth, part of generational wealth is having the wisdom of fathers. That's part of the problem in our community. We don't have a large gathering of Black male wisdom, even though
Mhm.
Black men probably have the greatest array and depth of experience than any other group, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely. No,
yeah.
I
So,
appreciate that.
but to say this too as well, there's a guy in the chat. He said it wasn't true because I mentioned that ADOS is going through the same kind of birth pains, that BLM is in terms of not really wanting to recognize Black men as leaders. Marlon Watson and a couple of other people basically have been ousted to some degree because of their association with FBA, and FBA is seen more as a patriarchal type led movement. So leader Yvette, she kind of, and some other more lesbian feminist gender minded leaders, they had a problem with that and basically kind of ousted a lot of the national leadership that was already in place. But all that to say, Tone Talks a while ago did a video. This is a while back, maybe a year or so. He did a video saying because he's a Black man, everyone forgets that he's the co-founder of ADOS. Like he said in the video, like, you guys don't even recognize me.
Mm. Okay. Okay. I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
it's consistent with, everything else we've been seeing. But it's an interesting turn as far as, the idea of Black men in leadership, right? There was a time period where that wasn't considered a strange occurrence, and now um, you know, it's considered a problem. So I appreciate that. Any other
Yeah.
thoughts about like some of the articles we covered tonight, or anything?
Um.
What do you think?
Yeah. Some of the articles. So, like, the whole idea that you can over focus on the female, even though the numbers are generally significantly less than the males,
Mhm.
that's a concerted effort on the part of white supremacy, and Black women are going along with it. you know
Mhm. Okay.
and then the comparison between our media versus their media, is that's laughable. I mean, because I share with you, on Messenger, I'm getting banned,
Mhm.
on Facebook and IG and everything. Right now, I can't even, the article you just shared about the about white women killing slaves at high numbers, such a high number that they had to create a law.
Mhm.
Messenger won't even let me post anymore.
Wow. Wow. Well, hey man, I appreciate you. You done dropped a few articles to me that I didn't find anywhere else. So I always appreciate that, man. Anything to
Yes,
say
sir.
before we have to kind of close out? Bring in someone else.
Oh, I think in a lot of ways, we have to continue to take ourselves more serious, and not allow this misandrous nature of the narrative to crowd us out. And as always, appreciate the work that you're doing, and everything. So, hey, keep up the good work.
Appreciate it, man. You do the same.
All
Peace.
right, peace.
Okay. Next up, we got Joel. Joel, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's on your mind, man?
Oh, not much. It's just it's ironic because I was planning on doing. I had recorded some videos like a month or two ago talking about propaganda
Mm,
and just talking in general, like not even propaganda specific to this topic, but just propaganda in general, and how to properly spot it and everything. And it's just like it's one of those things where it's like when I see articles like the ones you show, and how it's like the title will be one thing, and then if you actually read the article, and then they might have something in small text at the end of the article, which let's just be honest, most people don't read the whole article, but
right.
they'll have it hidden in the article like, oh, and this is actually the facts, you know what I'm saying? So it's like
Mhm.
it's worrisome because it's like some people they don't notice the importance of that. Like they'll just be like, oh, it's just some articles, it's not significant. I'm like, yes, it is significant, because imagine if this is going on 24/7. You know, every time you look at the news on TV, every time you read a newspaper, it's everywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I found that very interesting. And also on top of what you were talking about, the black men, which of course, you know, we're disregarded, we're kind of discarded in a way by the society, but it's also how I'm aware that we're kind of turning currently, like what you and BGS talk about, black men doing both better and worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been told by an executive, when he interviews people, some of the best candidates he interviews, meaning like they're professional, they're dressed proper, they know their stuff, like they are the creme de la crop. They're usually black people, you know what I'm saying? Because they have to be, you know, like we know, like if you're a black guy and you're at a certain level in your career, we know that you had to work your way to be there. Like there's no entitlement to it.
Mm-hmm.
And he also would explain like how some of the other candidates, they kind of come in with like sandals and crap, like ill prepared, like they kind of had that sense of entitlement, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, so it's kind of ironic, because it's like, okay, we know we have to be a certain way, we have to be perfect pretty much to kind of get the same, you know.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate
but
you take it easy, Joel.
Please, man.
Okay, let's see. Oh man, I gotta bring in Brother Malika. What's up, man?
Peace and love to you, big brother. How you doing today?
Doing all right, man. What's up with you?
I like this topic, man. It's always hard hitting, but also very intellectual too. The funny thing is, when you were talking about the article and how the way we are minimized or often pulled out, I put in the chat, it's revisionist history on steroids.
Okay.
And I was at work and I was talking with my best friend, and we were just talking about the manosphere and how the way it is. And he actually has a channel, and it's like a nerd channel. And he was talking about Kevin Samuels, and he was saying how the way he felt about Kevin Samuels. But I was telling him, I said, and I said this to you, and I said this to BGS, and I said this on Artisan's channel, and also with on Dennis's channel. I said, the internet, and especially social media in the past 10 to 15 years, has become like the Colt 45 pistol back in the Wild Wild West. It became the great equalizer, because the good, the bad, and the regular person had the ability to protect themselves.
Okay.
But the internet has given the platform to everybody, but especially for black men in the past 10 years, that we can hear our voices. And especially for men like you and Brother Curry, we're hearing the intellectual and statistical facts. And you're putting things to light where, just like that article was stating about the adult bias, that the Atlanta Star is a large media paper where it can reach a lot of people, even though we here on YouTube are reaching a lot of people, we're still not reaching the amount of people that the Atlanta Star would meet. And also it's backed by white folks and black women, where they're going to prop up and say, yes, this is it. But then we're saying, whoa, 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 whoa. When you come up, and Brother Curry and Brother Dennis and BGS, we come up with these stats, and we start saying things, that's when people start backpedaling, and they start saying, well, but no, here's the stats.
Right.
And we're saying, no, this is the stats and this is the proof. And just by we're saying, and we get that look, me and you as black men, we're like, are y'all crazy?
Right.
I was like, wait a minute. And you look at black men and say, hold up. What planet have you been on, and what country did you grow up in?
Yeah.
And we're saying, like, you're actually literally allowing those words to come out of your mouth to say that black women, I'm not saying that black women of all different ages are not being assaulted or killed or being abused by police, but they haven't slacked off of us. They're still killing us wholesale. Come on. Look what they did. Like, George Floyd was in Technicolor, man.
Yeah, man.
So my thing is, and I just sometimes I just want to say, like BGS said, I wish you just say to certain women that you don't care about us.
Okay.
And the thing is, and I'm not saying that to be bashing, but it gets to a point where you're low key dissing us and you're low key making us feel that we're unimportant. That's when you want to say, it's like, why don't you just say that you don't care about us?
Right. Right.
And the thing is, you're making, but like how you said, you're taking the black male's problems and issues and you're making them your own. White folks did it with the civil rights movement, and they pushed it in with ushering it in with, the feminist movement. So they just totally took over our stuff and saying, well, it's for all people. Now it came down the line. Now it's for transgender, it's for homosexuals, for women, it's for handicap. And it's like, damn, black people can't have shit. And now it's definitely black men, we can't have shit. We can't say we have a hangnail. We can't say, like, I got a toothache. Oh, but black women, they got better toothaches. Or you can't say, oh, I'm tired. My back hurt. Well, we had babies. Like, we can't have shit.
Right.
And not to make fun or light of it, but here's the thing. Think about this. I always use this idea as a number line. Because like in school, we have a number line. In the middle, there's the 0.
Okay.
At the left, there's the positive. At the right, there's the negative. So the middle is the balance. The left, positive, meaning everything's great. Of course, the negative means bad. It's black men. If we're doing great, we cannot be prideful for that. Even if you become president of the United States, you still have to be a humble person. Or if you did anything, you cannot be prideful of that. Black men were not allowed to be prideful for our accomplishments.
Okay.
But at the same time, we're so looked upon for our negative portrayal.
Right.
But at the same time, we just want to be normal. You know what I'm saying? Black men, we do want to be great, but at the same time, we just want to be fucking normal.
Yeah.
But even at the same time, when we be normal, they take that away from us.
Right.
And this is the problem where we get the misandry. Is like, so you don't want us to do shit. You just want us to stay there and accept that. But it's like, no, we're not doing that. And that's why I love the platform, what you're saying, but you're presenting facts. We're not just talking out the side of our necks. We're presenting facts and what it is. And I was telling my friend, I said, we have a voice now. And we're not just, you have men that are bashing, and a lot of dudes are just doing it for sensationalism. But the thing is, now I'm glad that you have articles that are showing, because like how you said, like the brother said, a lot of people don't read the articles fully. They just read the byline or the headline, but they don't pull back the layers and really how you're pulling it apart, how the way you pull it apart and how the way BGS pulls apart. And when you pull up charts and stats, this is the greatest thing. What I love what you do, you pull up a chart and you pull up a stat and you do it from the educational way, how like you're teaching class and you're teaching us, but you're teaching us to open our minds to say, this is what it is. And you're not saying that there's nothing bad, there's nothing good. You're saying what it is. Because men, we can take at face value of what it is. And it's like, oh, all right.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, man. I do. I got a few other people in here I want to get in, but as usual, man, I love when you come in and drop a word, man. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, big brother.
All right, man. You take it easy.
You too. Peace.
Peace. Let me get. Is that the good doctor? Who is that?
This is Anwar, Dr. Johnson.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
I didn't know if you were Dr. Dunbar or not, but I appreciate you calling in, Anwar. What's the word? What you think?
So, the response I have is that a lot of what you're putting together in the big picture, it's pretty much saying that as a Black man, you're being locked out of the most important part of life, which is relationships. Because we can go out into the world, we can get educated, we can compete in the corporate arena, we can play the game, we can, build our own businesses, do everything else right, but there's no real way to fight the propaganda that makes us look bad and kind of locks us out of relationships. That's what stands out to me the most about this from a really big picture standpoint, because it's about our image.
Right. Especially if our image is dehumanizing. Yeah. How
Yeah.
appealing are you for a relationship if the image of you is damn near animalistic? So I
Exactly.
appreciate that. Any closing thought before I have to transition?
That I don't know what we can do to counteract this, because with school, you can work hard. You can work hard in school and business and other areas of your life. But how do you counteract this? I don't know.
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, we talk about like one of the things I try to do here is to, kind of develop terms and use terms that are already kind of in circulation to bring them into the space and give us a language to make sense of. And I don't talk about that like I'm doing it by myself, but I think I'm part of a network of brothers who are trying to give language to our experience so we can better articulate ourselves. But then we also have, on the new blackmasculinities.wordpress.com blog, we have the Black Male Political Agenda, where there are actually distinct policies that we're pushing for. And then, and we're still expanding this conversation to come up with different solutions. But I think it's going to be a multi-pronged kind of approach. And it's going to take the involvement of, brothers on all kinds of levels, come up from all kinds of spaces. So I appreciate you calling in, man. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
All right, have a good night.
Take care.
Let me see here. Let's go ahead and bring in G. I think it's G Money. Is it G Money?
Yeah, how you doing? Good evening, good doctor. How's everything going?
Going well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me yet again. It's congratulations first of all to making it to 20,000 subscribers.
Oh, thank you.
I always support you. You do good work. Appreciate you, man. Man. Yeah,
any thoughts
go ahead.
about tonight? Go ahead. What do you think?
Oh, it is an excellent show. When you started talking about some of the things that Tone talked about in his show he had, which was last night, I actually caught some of it. Well, when he was actually doing it live, because what he tends to do, he'll do the show live, then take it off and edit it, then post it back on. I actually caught some a good portion of the live session.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because when you listen to some of the brothers that call in, and they don't really sound much different than a lot of your supporters. They'll come in. A good portion of his brothers, they're middle class, working class, and he has some of the professional brothers. I think he had a couple of professional six-figure brothers that called in.
Yeah.
And one of them I remember specifically. He said that he was like some sort of forensic scientist or some sort of scientist that works in the lab. And they make pretty good money. They make pretty good money. My little sister does that, and he said something that was very interesting. And the other brother that said that he worked in tech, he made over six figures, and he said something pretty interesting. And the thing is, like, when you make this sort of money, first off, six figures, 100,000, 120,000, not a lot of money, when you account for your cost of living and stuff like that, depending on where you live.
Yeah, especially if you're in like California or something. Yeah.
California, or even New York. I mean, I live in New York.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I make over six figures, and yeah. I mean, I'm doing okay, but it's not that much money, when you really look at it, especially if you live by yourself. But anyway, they said some things that I found interesting, right? So one of the brothers was saying, and you have the same experience because I listen to a lot of your shows. But one brother was saying that he'll I think it's a scientist brother. Yeah, he'll go on a date with like one of these women, and they will try to cut him down, like, oh, you think you're all that, and all this other stuff. And they'll talk down to him, like they'll stick his nose they'll stick their nose up at him, and he makes way more than they do.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, like moving the goalposts. They'll move the
yeah.
goalposts. That you talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
And the other brother was saying, yeah, because he lived in Cali, because I listened very carefully. Yeah, like a lot of guys that make six figures, they're not around walking around in business suits. A lot of them are going
Oh
to
yeah. Torn
a lot of them going to
jeans.
torn jeans and t-shirts. And I got traveled to Cali to visit my former roommate from college. He also works in the tech field, and we were like kind of hanging out in one of these one of these lounges that he's a member of, and most of the people in there were shorts and t-shirts, and they weren't yeah.
That even includes white wealthy cats. When I met
exactly
the most wealthy white folks, you would never know that they were as wealthy as they are unless you knew who they were or they told you. So no, I hear you.
A lot of times they don't tell you either.
No, they don't. But any closing thoughts? Because I got a few people I want to get in here, and I just want to make sure people have a chance to drop their thoughts in. So any closing thoughts before we transition?
I just want to say great show again, man, and thank you. Thank you for all the work you do.
Oh man, no, thank you for the support, man. You have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Let me see. We have let me see. I think it's Jamfar.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How you doing?
Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it. We're gonna have to go a little faster though, because we're about to close out soon. But any thoughts about the subject tonight, dealing with
I have a quick question. As I was listening to, as you were going through the process, I was just wondering, I was just curious, did Black men ever have an opportunity or a time period where we can truly enjoy our masculinity? I think of the new Negro movement, but even that was kind of slapped down. It's like, did we ever have that almost coming of age where it's like we could, that young lion coming of age and is like shake your mane, or is always had to be kept under wraps and, directed towards things that didn't upset, the status quo?
In all honesty, and this is, it's an opinion, but based from what I've, read, what I've seen, the expression of Black maleness, manhood, I should say, has never, in my knowledge, not been met with hostility. It's never not been met with fear, contestation, and men who expressed themselves understood they were doing so at the threat of loss of life. I've never really known that to not be the case, or even something more subtle, like, losing jobs, losing opportunities, so on and so forth. They used to have a term for that, if you were uppity, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You demonstrated a certain type of confidence, that you were not supposed to necessarily have. So I've never really known that to happen in any large scale way without it being met with fear. But I appreciate you calling in.
It does remind me. Oh, I'm sorry. It's like, it does remind me of a situation. The Helots? It's like the Helot situation with the Spartans. Whenever they were able to get a measure of confidence in their ability, those men were taken out.
Well, if you look at, again, going back to Sedanius's framework, it makes sense, right? Because it's really a confrontational dynamic, and one that's almost warlike in that respect. So it kind of makes sense. But I want to appreciate you. I want to thank you for coming up tonight. I'm about to move on because we're going to close out soon. But thanks a lot, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Let me see. We just got 3 more, so we're going to be real brief. Brother Adrian. Adrian, can you hear me?
How are we doing, good doctor?
Well, how about yourself?
I'm doing really well, man. It's good to speak with you tonight.
You as well.
I just had a
topic.
Yeah, I do. I just had a quick statement, really. We have to remember that, we live in a country that prides itself on the myth of American exceptionalism.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that you focus on the Black male, America becomes a lot less exceptional.
Mm.
So that's
Okay.
why we find ourselves being put into the background in these articles. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
you can't have an exceptional America when you have a black male that has been put upon as much as we have been consistently for what 156 years post slavery.
Okay. And your thoughts on the
That's just the
foreground?
statement that I wanted to make.
Your thoughts on the foregrounding of women and girls within the framework you've given us? How do you make sense of that?
Well, because I think that there's a willingness on their part to play ball.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for calling in with that. You have a good night. I appreciate you supporting the channel, man.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian. I didn't mean to cut that off, but appreciate you for coming up, man. Let me see, Adam.
Hey, how's it going, Doc? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's the word, man? What are your thoughts about tonight, about the subject matter?
Well, I think it's. I'll be very brief that I head out. I think it's. In concept, we were speaking before. In concept, in context of when it comes to policy, when it comes to the implementation of policy, the enforcement of policy, and even when it comes to these philanthropic projects, all of this has an influence on that because the people who enact these things are the public, right?
Okay.
I was thinking, imagine, for example, in family court, there's no jury. So imagine a family court judge that's, reads this Atlantic article speaking about how black men are, it's a step down marrying them, right? And now she's in court, and she's in court the next day. Why would I give custody to this man if it's a step down for the children to be with this man when I should just give custody to this woman? Right.
Okay.
I mean, and you have a whole court of people that are thinking like that. The defense attorney has the same concept in their head. The court clerk, all the people who are the investigators all believe the same thing. I mean, I can't get too deep into it because I don't want to,
I'm
the position I'm in. But the people who enforce the policy, they have a degree of discretion, enforcement discretion, right, or degree of independent latitude they get, and the concepts that are in their head when they're making those decisions are all influenced by pieces like the Atlantic, by these pieces that put black men in the rear, right? So when it's time for you to take these city funds, these government funds rather, and to dedicate them toward groups that need it, you only have but so much taxpayer money. Who are you going to give it to? Well, according to the article you read earlier, girls need much more help in school than boys, right? And so I guess I'm going to allocate this money toward these girls because I only got but so much of it, right? And these are the people that make these decisions are the same people who are reading it. The people who come out of the academy, which the bachelor's degrees, the master's degrees in psychology or whatever degree it is in sociology, whatever the degree is in, they're the same people who enter the corporate world. They're the same people who enter government and begin making these decisions. And so the work you're doing now is, in answer to the caller earlier, that the work you're doing now is the solution, because the people who come out of the academy get these jobs, get these positions, and then make decisions based on their academic training. Thanks again for your work, my brother.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it, man. You have a good night. And last up, is a treat. I asked him if he'd pop his head in for a second. I want to close on his thoughts about the subject matter for tonight. So shout out to BGS Moore. How you doing, man?
Hey, Doc. I don't know if there's any meat left on the bone there, man.
See, well, now you know how I feel. He'll call me and say, you should do a video on this. I'm like, you just did it. Ain't no meat left on the bone. But, we look tonight at some of the dynamics in regard to these articles and the presentation. Shout out to the original. Appreciate that generous donation. But we were talking about the way, black boys, black men, issues are being presented and used, but then quickly sidelined in a very particular way. Any thoughts about that?
We should start a series called Looking for Gucci Boots, right? Because what are black women doing? They're sicking their Gucci booted feet over the line of depression and placing themselves in front.
Mm,
So
mm,
they're basically following the same pattern that the white women are actually doing. That's why it's called looking for Gucci boots. They want the same Gucci boots that the white women have, and the only way they can get them is throw us under the bus. They can't throw the white men under the bus.
mm,
We're the only people that are left.
mm,
So what little we have, what little we got from civil rights, and what little we got from the Kerner Commission to actually enforce what we call equal opportunity.
mm,
Because I'm actually reading a book called "Freedom Is Not Enough," talking about um the, uh, the not only the Kerner Commission but also the Moynihan Report, right, and why he wrote it, and basically Moynihan actually designed all this stuff, all this civil rights, and all this equal opportunity for black men because he thought that was going to be the solution to the family. And even women agree that that's the solution to the family. But guess what they did? He said the only way to actually pull the black family up out of its mire and smuck in its mire is actually give black men financial and economic opportunities, right, to actually change their family.
yeah.
Guess what they did? They took it away from us. Okay, they allowed not only liberal white women to take it, the bulk of it, but now everybody else except black men. So uh, what we worked for, what we fought for, what we bled for,
Mm,
we didn't get.
yeah.
We didn't get, and even to this day, guess what we're still used as? Okay, they're still using our plight, our bodies, our blood, our sacrifice to get their gain.
Hmm.
And this is nothing new. All they're doing is following the same pattern.
Yeah.
I think I was reading something. I think it was a tweet. You might have seen it. Uh, the women, black women, are fine with calling out intersection, using intersectional feminism, intersectional theory, right? Until
Hmm.
black men start using the same thing. When black men try to carve out a section for themselves, oh no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Everybody else can actually use intersectional theory except black men.
I was gonna actually pull that clip up. I think Ian shot that to me,
Yes.
and I said, you know what, I won't pull it up tonight. But yeah, 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 dead
Yeah.
on, dead
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just like you talked about the Black Lives Matter chapter that's in New York.
mm,
They can't even use the name to fight for their own cause.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
unrecognized.
yeah. They very quickly acknowledged that that chapter is not recognized. And if you notice anything about the particular leadership, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying anything for or against him individually. I don't know
Right.
him, but I'm saying I find it interesting when you look at who's in that position, who's doing that work.
Hmm.
It's interesting to see how he's viewed and how his
Yeah.
whole chapter as a response is viewed. But then at the same time, when's the last time you've seen a black male leading a BLM chapter and being acknowledged, in a public manner?
Every time I see a BLM, I see a overweight black female with a bullhorn and a
Mhm.
lot of black male followers.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually become an inherent negative to
Hmm.
see a black man in a position of leadership within an organization that's built around black male death. And I
Yeah.
use, and you know what? This really isn't just about BLM. I use BLM as an example, but I think
Hmm.
it's happening in terms of how we see black leadership in general. Uh,
You look at what's going on with the housing in what was it? The college in Washington D.C. Howard,
mhm,
right? The
mhm,
housing protest in Howard, right?
mhm,
Okay, in the 70s and maybe even 80s, those kind of protests would actually be led almost exclusively by black men.
mhm.
Not anymore. The leaders are exclusively women.
Well, and that's and see, and that's already an issue. But when you add that to the fact that you on a given campus, brothers might only constitute a third of the population of black women, that's already a problem. I mean,
It's
I
already a
read an
problem.
article last year that was talking about how black men were an endangered species at HBCUs. You know what I mean? So yeah,
The thing is, it's one thing, when smart people know about it. The stats have been there for years. This is not new. Okay,
it's not new.
I've seen heard professors that went to the HBCUs in the 50s talk about the under participation of black males on the HBCU campus if it was actually co-ed. So it's not new. The thing is, it's only getting worse. Guess what? Do you hear any programs trying to recruit and train black boys to come to HBCUs unless they're athletes? Have you heard of any? One program.
Can't say anything.
In other words, you see a problem, everybody acknowledges the problem. But guess what? They'll be using that to make money for some nonprofit to actually put more girls into HBCUs.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. But look, man, I wasn't gonna hold you because I know
Right.
we got a number of panels that are trying to get a brother on here. But, I wanted to kind of close out with your thoughts. So I appreciate you popping up, man.
Yeah, it's this is like I said, we need to start a series called "Looking for Gucci Boots." And instead of the myth of white womanhood, they want the same Gucci boots that white women get.
Yeah,
that's all it is. And put their feet over the line of oppression and get to the front of the line, even in front of their own men.
Well, and I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, even though you're supposed to solve the problem of the people that need it most. That's even feminism says that it's supposed to be equality, right? I don't see any equality amongst the black females.
Well, and I think that's one of the dangers of some of these conversations that are being had because we've been socialized to allow that to continue. We've been socialized to accept that as a norm. But when you actually have black men asking and qualifying the difference in our experiences, asking questions we're not supposed to ask, presenting data to show which issues have nothing to do with certain demographics or less to do and more to do with black men. In other words, when black men start demanding space in the discussion for their measurable experience, that's now all of a sudden a problem, right? But you don't see black men trying to demand space in terms of issues that don't pertain to them. Black men are not running around here arguing that they want to be part of the discussion and that they're not being centered when we talk about, goodness, I don't know, envy. No, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Anyway.
No,
it's going to come out
not
clean.
today. Not today.
But yeah, I mean, in certain circles, I'll keep it safe. I'll go back to the breast cancer now. We're not pushing down doors to be centered in areas where we're not. That's not the discussion. And it's not about being centered to exclude others, but it is about what the hell the numbers actually show. And if the numbers actually show it, then we should talk about it. As far as that, you don't bring up an issue and then completely sideline the people that are suffering from it the most. It's just ridiculous. But
it is.
I appreciate you coming up, especially with last minute notice. So thanks a lot, man.
All right, Doc. Good show. Good series. I don't know how much more gas is in the tank for this series, but right here, right now, we're gonna have to have Doc review what Tone actually talked about because you've talked about it before. So we're gonna put pressure on Doc to actually review that and put something out about that because behind the scenes, Doc is Doc is punching through walls. Okay. So we're gonna have to let if Doc can't do it, we're gonna have to let Hasan do it.
Oh damn! Here you go.
Hasan will do it.
Much appreciation, man.
All right, Doc.
All right, man.
Please. All right, peace.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna leave you with for a quick second, the words I kind of quoted for you earlier from Quiz the Poet. And now again, I mentioned BLM, but not really focusing on the organization. I'm really using it as an example of black men in particular types of leadership, especially in regard to activism and the extent to which they're viewed in some circles, many circles, I would argue, as a problem, as something not to be taken seriously. And so I think when you look at Quiz's words, they kind of hit home, right? So you got outgroup males, who ran outgroup chapters to organizations built on the backs of dead outgroup males. I think that's where we are. And black men have to be unapologetic about calling out the use or misuse of their experiences, while at the same time the silencing of their voices and the forced absence of their presence. All right. So shout out to y'all. Hope y'all have a good night. I appreciate you. And I will be, when I do start posting my daily shows again, I hope you'll support. So other than that, y'all have a good night. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic and selfish and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.